Reed was the one who picked the spot. Some park he read about online, buried deep in the state forest system, way off the usual trails. No reviews, no cell coverage, no ranger station. Just a vague map and a parking lot overgrown with weeds. Perfect for a weekend off-grid, he said. Mara had rolled her eyes when he pitched it, but she came anyway. I think she needed a break as badly as I did. Work had been eating through me like acid. My hands wouldn't stop shaking even when they weren't doing anything. I needed trees. I needed silence. And I trusted Reed, even if his idea of camping veered toward abandoned places and unmarked trails. We set out late Friday morning, packs heavy, boots biting. The first 2 miles were easy. Sunlight through high branches, the smell of moss and pine, occasional birdsong. We passed maybe one other hiker the entire time, a guy coming the other way, sweaty and muttering to himself like he was counting steps. Reed gave him a nod, but the guy didn't even look up. The deeper we went, the thinner the trail got, until the main path curved east, but Reed paused at a fork barely wide enough for a deer. "There," he said, pointing with the end of his hiking pole. "That's not on the map, because it's not a trail," Mara said. Reed grinned. "Exactly." I hesitated, but not for long. That's the thing about the three of us. We'd known each other too long to resist the pull of whatever Reed got excited about. We followed him off the path, ducking through low limbs and brush. It felt like the forest got denser the second we left the marked trail, as if we were pushing into something that hadn't been walked in a long time. Branches scraped our arms. The air felt thicker. We walked for another 20 minutes before we saw it. The trees parted just enough to reveal a narrow clearing, and at the center stood a crooked wooden post, weathered and blackened at the top like it had been struck by lightning a long time ago. Hanging from a rusted hook near the top was an old iron bell, the kind you'd expect to see on a farm or maybe an old schoolhouse, though this one looked older than both. It didn't swing, it didn't shine. It just hung there, heavy and unmoving, a thin line of rust leaking from its clapper. "What the hell?" Mara said, stepping forward. We all approached, cautious at first. The ground beneath it was worn, but not by footsteps. It was smooth, compacted earth, as if something had sat there for years, like the forest had grown up around it and then forgot why. There were words carved into the post. Just one line, uneven and shallow. "Do not ring unless you want company." "Okay, creepy," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Reed laughed, but it came out forced. Probably some backwoods joke. You know, scare the tourists. "There are no tourists here," Mara said, narrowing her eyes. "This isn't even a maintained trail." Reed reached toward the bell. "Don't," I said before I could stop myself. He raised an eyebrow. "What, you think it actually does something?" "I think it's nailed to a tree in the middle of nowhere with a weird threat scratched into it. That's enough reason not to mess with it." He shrugged and stepped back, but I could tell the bell had already crawled into his head. His eyes kept drifting to it, even as we agreed to make camp a little ways off in a flat patch just past the clearing. We didn't talk about the bell after that. Not out loud. The lights started to die fast. The forest got quiet. No wind, no insects, just the creak of trees leaning on each other. We set up our tents, built a fire, and sat around eating trail mix and heating foil packs of food over the flames. It should have felt like every other trip we'd done over the years, but the silence hung wrong. "Tell me you've got reception," Mara said, holding her phone to the sky. "No bars since mile 2, I said, tapping mine. Useless. Even the GPS wouldn't load. "Guess we're really unplugged now," Reed said, smiling like that was the point. He poked the fire with a stick and glanced toward the trail we came from. "You know, if that bell really was part of a ritual or something, this would be the perfect setting." "Can you not?" Mara said. "Seriously, don't start with that. What? You're not even curious?" "It's probably a prank," I muttered. "Someone screwing with hikers, or maybe a warning, from before they shut this place down." "It's not shut down," Reed said. "No, but it sure as hell feels like it." We fell into silence after that. each of us lost in our own thoughts. The fire popped. Something scurried through the brush behind us, just a rabbit or squirrel probably, but Mara stiffened and glanced toward the clearing. "Let's not talk about it," she said. We didn't, but I noticed she kept her flashlight closer than usual that night. Around midnight, I lay in my tent with my sleeping bag zipped up to my chin, trying to tune out the creaks and groans of the forest. I thought I heard a bell, just once, soft, metallic, distant. I held my breath, heart hammering. Nothing followed. No footsteps, no voices. Just that faint echo that could have been a twig snapping in the right way, or could have been nothing at all. In the morning, Reed was the last one up. Mara and I drank instant coffee while the sun struggled through the trees. We hadn't spoken yet. Neither of us wanted to admit that something felt off. Reed finally stepped out of his tent, stretching. "Sleep okay?" I asked. He nodded, too casually. "Fine. You?" I hesitated. "Did you hear anything last night?" He squinted at me. "Like what?" "I don't know. A noise. A bell, maybe." He didn't answer right away. Then he smiled faintly. "We're in the woods, man. Your brain makes up stuff when it's that quiet." Mara poured out the rest of her coffee and walked off toward the trees. After breakfast, we planned a short day hike. I suggested we head back toward the marked trail, just to reorient ourselves, but Reed wanted to go deeper. "There's something weird about this forest," he said, adjusting his pack. "Like it's untouched. It's kind of beautiful." "I'd rather stick to what we know," Mara muttered. "We'll follow the same way back. Just want to see if this offshoot leads anywhere." Reluctantly, we followed. The air smelled damp. It wasn't raining, but the ground was soft like it had been misting before we woke up. The deeper we went, the more overgrown it got. No footprints but ours. No signs anyone had been here in years. After half an hour, we found nothing but trees and deadfall. "I think we're just bushwhacking now," I said, wiping sweat from my neck. Reed finally agreed to turn back. On the way, I noticed he kept looking behind us. When I asked why, he just shook his head. Thought I heard something. It wasn't until we were back near the bell post that he stopped walking entirely. "Was that there before?" he asked. The bell was still hanging, still rusted, still crooked. But now it looked different. Maybe just the light, maybe something else. Reed walked toward it slowly. "Reed," Mara warned. He didn't touch it. He just stood there, staring up at it, like it was whispering something he couldn't quite hear. I reached out and grabbed his arm. "Don't." "I wasn't going to," he said, eyes still fixed on the bell. That night, we made camp farther back than before, deeper into the brush, out of sight of the clearing. No fire this time, Mara insisted. Just cold food and quiet conversation under the heavy boughs of pine. The light disappeared fast again. No stars, too many clouds. I lay in my tent listening. Around 1 in the morning, I heard metal again. Not a ring, a clink, like a chain being nudged, or the soft bump of something heavy swaying. Then, footsteps, just a few, crisp, crunching over dry leaves. I froze, eyes wide open in the dark, barely breathing. The steps stopped. No one said anything. No tent unzipped. No lights turned on. I waited for Reed to call out. He didn't. Eventually, I must have dozed off, because when I woke, the sun was rising and Reed was gone. His sleeping bag was still unzipped, like he'd just stepped out for a piss and hadn't come back. His boots were gone, so was his flashlight. But the weirdest part, the part I didn't say out loud, was how calm it all looked. No scuff marks, no broken branches, nothing that hinted at panic, just absence. Mara was already searching. I caught up to her near the edge of camp where the trail narrowed again. She held a hand up, pointing. "Footprints," she said quietly. Sure enough, a clear set of boot prints, Reed's, tracked through the damp soil, heading back the way we'd come. But not toward the main trail, not toward the car, toward the bell. We followed in silence. Something about the hush made me feel like we were intruding, like we were walking into a room where someone had just been praying. The prints led us directly to the clearing. The bell still hung there, unmoving. But something was different. I couldn't put my finger on it until I noticed the ground. Something had disturbed the dirt. A long, shallow impression dragged away from the post, cutting through moss and weeds, like something had been pulled. "There," Mara whispered. The drag mark disappeared into the trees beyond, a direction we hadn't gone yet. "Reed?" she called out. Nothing. I moved toward the bell, instinctively, like it might explain something. It still hung from the same warped hook, but the post looked different now, less crooked somehow, like it had been straightened. I squinted at the carving. It was still there, still said, "Do not ring unless you want company." But the wood beneath looked fresher, not new, just less rotted. "I don't like this," I said. Mara was scanning the tree line. "We need to go back, get help." "How?" "We're at least 7 miles from the car, and you know the signal's gone. We'll hike out, together. We'll find someone." I didn't argue. We packed Reed's gear and headed in the direction we thought would take us back to the main trail. But something was wrong, subtle at first. I recognized familiar landmarks, a fallen log we'd stepped over, a split-trunk birch, but the path between them didn't match my memory, like the spaces had stretched or twisted. We walked for over an hour and still hadn't found the trail. Eventually, Mara stopped. "That's impossible." Ahead of us, half shrouded by brush, stood the same clearing, the same bell. I walked forward faster now and stood beneath the post, same height, same shape, but the hook was different. Before, it had been rusted all the way through. Now it looked newer, still old, still corroded, but intact. Mara dropped her pack. No way. We didn't come in a circle. We followed a straight line. "We're turned around," I said, but the words didn't even convince me. The forest had no wind, no bird song. Even the insects had gone still. Everything felt paused. We made camp again. We didn't want to, but night was coming fast, and the idea of walking under those trees in the dark felt worse than staying put. We moved a few 100 feet from the clearing and settled in without a fire. Mara lay on her side in the tent, eyes open. "Maybe he's messing with us," she said. "Maybe Reed rang it, as a joke." "He wouldn't drag himself through the woods," I said. "Maybe he got lost. Then why are we stuck here?" She didn't answer. We both knew it didn't make sense. The air was too still, the forest too quiet. I didn't sleep. Not really. I drifted in and out, haunted by the sound of creaking wood. Once I thought I heard footsteps just outside the tent, but I couldn't be sure if it was real or some dream bleeding into the dark. Around 3, I woke again. Mara was gone. The flap of the tent was open, just a little. Cold air drifted in. I sat up fast, heart hammering, and reached for my flashlight. When I unzipped the tent and stepped out, the night hit me full in the face, thick, heavy. A thin fog was starting to creep along the forest floor. I called her name once. No answer. I turned in a slow circle, light scanning trees, and then, between 2 trunks, I saw movement. A shape. I raised the flashlight. Mara stood in the clearing, near the bell. Her back was to me, hands slack at her sides. The fog rolled past her boots. Her head was tilted just slightly, as if listening. "Mara?" I called out. She turned. Her face was pale, eyes wide, not in fear, but something else, wonder, dread. "I heard him," she said. I stepped closer. "What?" "Reed. He's close. I swear to God, I heard him call my name." I looked around. No sign of anything else, just trees, the bell, the endless hush. "We need to go," I said. "Now." She nodded, slowly, but her eyes lingered on the bell. Back at camp, I sat awake while she zipped herself into her sleeping bag. She didn't say anything else, and in the morning, she was gone. No noise, no warning. Her gear still in place, boots by the tent, jacket folded on her back. I checked for prints. Nothing. The earth around her tent was undisturbed, like she dissolved into the air. I ran to the clearing. The bell hung there, same as before, but now something new was scratched into the post. beneath the original carving. It hadn't been there yesterday. I would have noticed. You heard IT too, didn't you? The words were fresh, still ragged at the edges as if dug in by a blade. The bark around them was clean. I took a step back. The bell swayed slightly, and I didn't know if it was the wind or something else, but the air was still as ever. No breeze, no sound. I grabbed my pack and started walking. Any direction, I didn't care. Just away from the clearing, away from the post. I picked what looked like a well-trodden path and followed it until my legs ached. But the forest refused to thin. Every bend brought more trees. Every clearing felt too familiar. At one point, I broke into a full run, lungs burning, pack bouncing against my back. I didn't stop until my vision blurred and my knees buckled. When I looked up, the bell was hanging 30 feet away. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just sat there for a long time, staring at the rust-stained clapper, the warped post, the words. Both sets. It was still the same clearing, but the trees around it had shifted. I was sure of it now. They leaned at odd angles, like they were watching. I set up a fireless camp again. No tent, just a blanket in my bag. No use pretending I could sleep through this. My thoughts were fraying at the edges, unraveling like rope left out in the rain. The bell didn't ring that night. Not once. But I thought I heard something breathing. It was just past the clearing, just beyond the light of my flickering headlamp. Wet and slow. Not fast enough to be panic, not deep enough to be sleep. It stopped when I sat up. It didn't come closer. It didn't move away. And then, just before dawn, I noticed the trees behind the bell were darker than they should have been. Like a shape stood there, something tall, motionless. I didn't look long. I turned off the light, laid still. When morning came, I packed quickly, left the tent, left extra supplies. I tried a different direction, carved a mark into a tree every 20 feet. After 2 hours, I turned around. The marks were gone, or rather, they were on different trees. Same symbol, same cut depth, but not the same bark, not the same spacing. It was like the forest took them and planted them elsewhere, or copied them. Badly. I stopped walking. I stood there until I couldn't feel my hands anymore. Then I walked back to the clearing, because I knew I'd end up there anyway. The bell didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. Like the sound it hadn't made yet was sitting heavy in the air, waiting for something, someone, to give it permission. That night, I wrapped my coat tight and built a ring of stones around me. I didn't believe it would help, but it gave my hands something to do. I ate a cold protein bar and tried not to listen, tried not to hear the soft scrape of something passing just beyond the trees. Not leaves, not twigs, metal, dragging through dirt. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the scraping sound would come back, steady, mechanical, like something dragging something else behind it, or maybe like something dragging itself. I wrapped the straps of my pack around my hands just to feel something solid, a tether. I kept my headlamp off. I didn't want to know if anything was watching from the dark, but I also didn't want to see the clearing again if I looked up. I knew I hadn't moved far from it. I didn't want to see the bell swinging, or worse still. At some point I started muttering under my breath, stupid things, counting steps, naming cities I'd visited, trying to pin myself to reality. The stillness of the woods felt like it was pressing in, like something was waiting for me to fall asleep just once. I stood up instead. If I couldn't sleep, I'd work. I started marking trees. I found a sharp rock and carved wide X's into the bark every 10 yards. Then I laid sticks across the trail, hoping I'd hear them snap if anything followed. I even tied some thin strips of my shirt between 2 trees to form a trip line. It wouldn't stop anything, but I needed to know if something crossed through. By the time I finished, the light was thinning. Not sunrise, just moonlight dipping. My body ached from the cold and exhaustion. I crawled back into my makeshift camp and pulled the blanket around my shoulders. The silence was worse than before. Even my own breathing felt too loud. Every now and then the forest would groan like something old stretching just out of sight. But I kept listening for one sound in particular, the bell. When it came, it was so soft at first I thought I imagined it, a faint metallic ring, but not struck hard, just brushed, like fingers running along the edge. Then it rang again, louder. The sound echoed through the trees like it didn't belong there, like it was from somewhere else entirely. The pitch was wrong, high, shrill, and somehow hollow at the same time. It rattled through my spine. I held still, waiting. Another ring. This one came from the other direction. Then silence. No footsteps, no breathing, no animal sounds. Just that growing dread I couldn't reason through. The bell rang a fourth time. It sounded close. Too close. I forced myself to look over the edge of the blanket. The light from my headlamp held low against my chest, and then I saw it, a shape not 20 feet away, between two trees, taller than any man I'd ever seen, draped in something ragged that hung off its shoulders in heavy folds. At first I thought it might be bark or moss, but it moved too slightly in the breeze. It wasn't natural. The shape didn't move, didn't breathe. It just stood there, too still, too centered. My light flickered once. I shut it off. I pressed myself flat against the ground, afraid even the beat of my pulse would give me away. Every second dragged longer than the last. I heard nothing, but I knew it hadn't gone. At some point, light filtered through the trees again. Dawn, though you could barely call it that. The woods didn't brighten. They just bled into less darkness. The shape was gone. I stood slowly, legs shaking. My traps were still untouched. The trip line hung between the same two trees. The sticks I'd laid across the path were still there, undisturbed. Nothing had passed through, but something had been there. I walked back to the clearing, not because I wanted to, because I had to. The bell stood exactly where it had. Same post, same rusted chain, same carved warnings. But now, another addition. So faint I almost missed it. Scratched into the iron of the bell itself, as if with a nail or sharpened bone. "Why haven't you rung yet?" My stomach clenched. The words weren't old. They gleamed where the iron was scraped clean. I picked up a rock and threw it. It bounced off the bell with a dull clang. Not a ring, just metal on metal. I picked up another. This time I aimed higher, right at the chain. It hit with a loud crack, and the bell swayed slightly on its hook but didn't fall. I ran up to it and grabbed the post. It was soft with age, brittle near the base. I jammed the rock against the wood, hacking with as much force as I could. Each time I struck the post, the bell rang. Not like before. Each chime was louder, sharper, like it wanted to be rung, like it wasn't just responding, it was echoing. And every echo went deeper. I felt it in my ribs. I screamed and slammed the rock against the chain. It didn't snap. The rust flaked off, but the iron held. I gave up. I backed away and collapsed onto the dirt, panting. When I looked up, I saw them. Figures. More than one. Standing in the trees. Far enough away to blur with the trunks, but close enough that I could count them. 6. They didn't move, didn't sway. Just watched. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't blink much either. I waited. The figures never came closer, but they didn't leave. They shifted places sometimes. I'd glance away, and when I looked back, 2 of them would have traded positions. At some point, one of them vanished and reappeared on the opposite side of the clearing. But they never came close, not yet. When morning came, I stayed seated and listened to the rustle of branches I couldn't see moving. Then I turned to face the bell again. Something leaned against my pack, a second bell, identical to the first, same shape, same corrosion around the edges, same carved post but shorter, just a rough stick jammed into the ground. And no writing on this one, none yet. The second bell didn't swing, but I didn't touch it. Instead, I stood and looked back toward the woods. The original figures were still out there, watching, waiting. The second bell felt like a deadline. like the forest was giving me time to decide what kind of company I wanted. I started writing. I tore up pages from my notebook, my trail log, anything I had. I wrote what happened. I wrote names. I wrote dates. I wrote "Don't ring the bell" so many times the words lost their shape. I left the notes in plastic under rocks, in the crooks of trees. I stuffed one into the pocket of Reed's coat, still hanging from my pack. But the next morning, all the notes were stacked neatly in front of my sleeping bag, folded, and someone had written something new on the top one. Still waiting. I didn't eat that day. My stomach twisted at the thought of food. I drank water, tried to follow the sun. I walked again, one last time, trying to escape. I walked in a straight line, using a compass for my emergency kit. 3 hours. I reached the clearing again. Now there were 3 bells, the original, the one beside my pack, and another hammered into the opposite end of the clearing. Smaller, cruder, but it had a clapper and it hung ready. That night the figures came closer, 10 paces from the tree line. I still couldn't make out faces. I don't think they have any. Their clothes, or what hung from them, dragged in the dirt. Some of it looked like burlap, other pieces like twisted bark or cloth soaked in something dark. They didn't approach the bells. They just watched me. I lay down again. Didn't sleep. Didn't even pretend. My breath came short and shallow. I felt like my heart would give out before dawn. I waited for one of them to move. Just one. They never did. But I knew they would. Eventually. They were waiting for me to ring. That was the rule, wasn't it? Don't ring unless you want company. I already had company, but I hadn't invited it yet, and that meant it wasn't finished. I waited until the sun was high, if you could even call it that. Light filtered through the canopy like it was bleeding out. I packed my bag slowly, deliberately, leaving everything I didn't need. Tent, stove, tarp. Lighter load meant more speed. I kept the compass, the map, a water bottle, and my last 2 protein bars. I didn't touch the second bell. I didn't even look at it. I turned my back to the clearing and walked. I didn't think about direction anymore. It didn't matter. Every trail I tried led back here. I just walked, fast, no breaks. I kept moving, thinking maybe that would disrupt whatever rhythm the forest wanted from me. Maybe momentum mattered. Maybe standing still was what made them come. I didn't hear the bells at first, but I felt them, a low thrum in my chest, like the sound of something big underwater. Pressure more than noise. Then came the first tone, distant, faint, but clear. Not the bell I knew. This one was deeper, hungrier. Another tone followed closer, ringing out in the trees behind me. A higher pitch, urgent. Then another. The tones overlapped, layers building into a chorus of wrongness, each bell slightly off from the next, like they were tuned to different worlds. I ran. My boots hammered the ground, twigs whipped my arms, branches clawed at my face. I didn't stop to look. I didn't turn back. But the bells followed, not just the sound, but the idea of them. They echoed inside my teeth, behind my eyes. The ringing wasn't around me, it was in me, like the forest was trying to harmonize something loose in my spine. I screamed just to hear my own voice. Still, I ran. For miles, maybe. I don't know. I passed trees I didn't recognize, terrain that felt wrong. Too sloped, too open. The trail flattened unexpectedly, revealing a break in the trees ahead. That's when I saw it. A clearing, but not like the others. No trees bordered this one. No canopy overhead. Just a wide, circular field filled with low grass and thick, unnatural fog beyond it. It looked wrong. Geometric. Perfect. I didn't stop. I ran straight into the fog. The air chilled immediately, heavy with moisture. My breath puffed in front of me like smoke. I kept running until the bells grew quieter, drowned out by the thickness in the air. The fog was a wall. I pushed through it blindly, barely able to see the ground under my feet. There were no trees here, no roots, just soft, spongy soil, like walking over something that shouldn't be alive. The sound of my steps changed. They no longer echoed into the distance. They The air swallowed them. Then the bells stopped. All of them, mid-tone, like someone had cut a wire. I stood frozen in the fog. That silence was worse than the ringing. I turned in a slow circle, breathing hard, trying to make sense of where I was. Nothing but pale mist in every direction. I pulled the compass out of my pocket and held it flat. The needle spun uselessly. That's when I heard the first step. Not mine. Behind me. Deliberate. Wet. I turned but saw nothing. Then another. To the left. And another. Closer. Not running, just walking. Dragging. I moved backward, heart slamming, trying not to trip. I couldn't see anything, but the sound of steps was growing. Many steps. They came from all around now. Shuffling. Shifting. Moving in a wide, slow spiral that began to tighten. I turned and ran again. I don't know what direction. I just moved. The fog never cleared. It only thickened. My legs burned. My lungs clawed for air. I could hear the grass tearing beneath me, wet roots snapping. The steps followed, closer, in sync now, not rushed, not panicked, just closing in. The fog thinned suddenly. I broke through into another clearing, this one smaller. A circle of dark soil, cracked and sunken, like something had been buried there and dug up again. A single bell stood in the center. It was different, older, bent. The post supporting it was warped and scorched, but still intact. The bell itself was larger than the others, nearly the size of a barrel. It had no chain, no hook. It sat balanced atop the post like it had been placed there by hands too large for precision. There was no writing, just blackened iron, cold and waiting. I backed away, breath shaking. Behind me, the steps slowed. I couldn't see them, but I knew they had stopped just at the tree line, just beyond the ring of fog, waiting. For what? I turned to face the bell again. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to see this, but some part of me understood. This was where the path ended. The bell didn't move. I stepped forward, not by choice, by gravity. The dirt squelched beneath my feet. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear my pulse hammering in my ears. I stood in front of the bell. Then, somewhere behind me, another bell rang. A slow, warbling note, not like the others. This one was wrong. It didn't sound metal. It sounded wet. I turned and saw them. Figures stepping into the clearing. Not all at once, one by one. 10, maybe 12, maybe more. Tall and narrow, dragging their limbs like they were too heavy. Their clothes were soaked. Some wore what looked like rope or twine twisted around their arms. Others had bark stitched into their sleeves. I couldn't see their faces, if they had any, but they were all facing me. No sound, just that presence. I backed into the bell without meaning to. My shoulder brushed against its cold surface. The sound it made was so low I didn't hear it. I felt it, like my ribs had turned into tuning forks. All at once, the figure stopped moving. One of them tilted its head. Then another. They didn't come closer. They just waited. Something in me cracked. I turned and ran again. I didn't care if they followed. I didn't care where I ended up. I just moved. Through fog, through brambles, through the trees that suddenly reappeared like they'd never been gone. The forest bent and twisted, but I didn't stop. And then, like stepping through a curtain, it all changed. The woods thinned. The air cleared. I stumbled forward into sunlight. Real sunlight. The sound of a bird. I fell to my knees on gravel. There was a road. An actual road. Faded paint lines. A rusted guardrail. I crawled forward and collapsed at the edge, staring at it like it was something holy. I heard a car engine in the distance. A second later, a figure stepped out of the trees a dozen feet down the road. Not from the forest I came from, the other side. He was dressed like a hiker. Jacket, pack, clean boots. He looked like someone who'd just started a morning trail. I stood slowly, unsteady, and waved him down. "Hey," I called. "Hey, can you help me?" He looked at me, but didn't respond. He kept walking, slow and deliberate, closer. I backed away a step. Something was wrong with the way he moved. too smooth, like he didn't have weight. He passed me without a word. As he did, I saw the zipper of his backpack wasn't closed all the way. Inside, resting carefully in the fold of canvas and nylon, was an iron bell. Small, identical. I didn't speak. I didn't stop him. I just let him walk past and disappear into the same woods I had just come out of. I kept walking. Down the road. No destination. I don't remember how I got home. I must have, because I'm here now, and I'm writing this. Online. In every forum that will let me post, and every camping thread, survival blog, off-grid subreddit. I'm writing it because I know someone will find one. The bells, the post, the words, "Do not ring unless you want company." I never rang it, not once, and they still came. I've tried to forget it, God knows I have, but it's not the kind of thing you forget. Even now, weeks later, back in my apartment, door locked, phone charged, TV humming, I still hear them. Not every day, not always, but they find ways to slip in the hum of the refrigerator, the wind through the stairwell, that high metallic ring when a spoon clinks the wrong way in the sink. I haven't slept a full night since I got out. I haven't spoken to anyone about it in person. I couldn't. What would I even say? That I went into the woods with 2 friends and came out alone, chased by figures made of wet rags and silence. That I found a bell that didn't want to be rung, but waited, patient, as if it knew I eventually would. That the forest itself bent around me like it was holding its breath. I tried writing it down for myself at first, not for posting, just to see it on paper, to make it feel real. I wrote everything, what Reed said, what Mara heard, what I saw, the bells, the second bell, the third, the fog, the field, the sound of something dragging through soil just out of view. I wrote it all. Then I opened my notebook the next morning to find pages missing, not torn, not cut, just gone. The spiral binding still held them in place, still counted the slots where they had been, but they were empty now. Paper turned thin and gray. I didn't try writing again for days after that. When I finally logged into a backwoods survival forum I used to lurk, I found a thread that made my heart seize. Has anyone heard of a bell in the woods? The original post was vague. Someone had found a photo in a box of old family camping gear, black and white, faded, warped around the edges. It showed a crooked wooden post with a bell hanging from it. The caption on the back said only, "Do not ring unless you want company." I messaged the user immediately. No reply. 3 days later, the post was gone. Their account was too. I started checking other forums, Reddit, paranormal boards, obscure hiking blogs, lost trail archives. I started searching names I remembered from my map, trail systems, decommissioned parks, state forests no longer marked. They showed up sometimes, in fragments. An old man who said he once found a bell like that in Virginia, but it vanished before he could photograph it. A ranger log from the 80s detailing reports of stationary ringing sounds near the closed logging roads of eastern Washington. A woman who posted once in 2011 claiming her brother had followed an unmarked trail during a solo trip and never returned. She mentioned he'd called her before he vanished just once to say, "I heard it again. It's getting louder." The story slips through places, through people, like it doesn't stay still for long, like it's not tied to one forest. I didn't believe in that kind of thing before. I do now. Last week I took a walk near my apartment, just to get air. It was early, maybe 6:30 in the morning, and the streets were mostly empty. I passed a man walking the opposite direction. He wore a bright orange jacket and carried a hiking pole slung through a loop in his backpack. I might not have noticed him at all if he hadn't flinched when our eyes met. He looked away too quickly, like he recognized me. I froze, watching him go. He moved like someone who didn't want to be noticed but couldn't help it. I turned, following at a distance. Not close, just enough to keep him in sight. He stopped at the bus shelter on 3rd and Monroe, sat on the bench, pulled out a thermos. His pack rested on the bench beside him. The zipper tugged open just enough. I stood across the street pretending to check my phone, pretending to wait for something. Then I saw it, inside the pack, tucked into the top pouch like it had been carefully packed. An iron bell, identical to the first one. Same rusted curve, same squat clapper. My throat went dry. I turned and walked away. I didn't speak, didn't confront him. I didn't even cross the street. What would I have said? Me too? That night, I went back through every file on my computer, every note I'd started, every copy I'd saved of the story I tried to write. They were all corrupted, not missing, just ruined. The text scrambled, replaced with characters I didn't recognize. Some of them looked like they weren't from any known language. Others were just wrong. Letters upside down, sentences that ran backward or repeated with one word changed each time. But always, somewhere in the mess, was the word bell. Sometimes capitalized, sometimes inverted, always present. I stopped trying to keep it offline. I've been posting what I can now, bits and pieces, warnings, trying to keep it alive in people's minds. If no one knows about it, if no one remembers the rule, someone will ring it. Someone always does, because that's what it wants. Curiosity. Even fear is still a kind of attention. The post always says the same thing now. It's in my clipboard, ready to go, pinned at the top of every thread I join, shared with every email that pings my inbox asking about the bell, the trail, the vanishings. It says this: do not ring the bell, not even once. I don't care if you find it in a national park or an abandoned farm or a trail that's not on your GPS. I don't care if it looks old and harmless. I don't care if it's silent or if the wind makes it sway gently. I don't care if your friends laugh and dare each other to tug the clapper or knock on the post. Don't touch it. Don't speak near it. And if you hear it ring when no one's around, walk away.